It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show. I am so delighted you are here, and we're going to have some good fun today. Coming up later in the show, I have a segment on buying bonds versus bond index funds, and a segment on REITs, general regular REITs like REIT index funds versus non-traded REITs, which, short answer, don't buy them. But I'll go into a lot of the reasons of why I think they're terrible. Before I do that, of course, I'm going to give you an update on my recent travels. I hinted at it in the last couple of episodes, and now I'm back home, so yay. Hopefully you didn't miss me too much. We went to Ireland, and you can get more information about the places I went and some of the photos on my Facebook page. And it's just Phil Ferguson on Facebook. But we went to Ireland. We were there a couple days before the cruise started so we could do some things on our own. We had a tour, a Game of Thrones tour, which was pretty cool. It took us to a couple of forests in Ireland and Northern Ireland, which is not part of Ireland. It's very confusing, but, you know, it's cool. Got to go see locations where some of the scenes in the TV show were filmed. That was very, very cool. And to make it a little more fun, this tour group, they gave you a cloak and a sword to carry around, which was kind of cool until it got hot. Then it was not cool. Not cool at all. And Ireland and Northern Ireland don't get particularly warm, but we happened to be there in a rare streak of good and warm weather. It's often cooler in the summer and, of course, nowhere near as cold as continental United States in the winter because of the Gulf Stream. Thank you very much, Gulf Stream. But I ended up carrying my cloak around, and but it took us to a couple of different sites, and that was good fun. I also noticed it was kind of weird. The tour guide would say lines from the movie, and people knew the lines, and would kind of do a call and response. And I was like, wow, I don't know some of that stuff, which, you know, I'm worried that I forget it. I mean, I remembered like winter is coming, you know, that's pretty easy. And the North remembers, you know, okay, cool. But other things I was like, wow, maybe I need to go back and rewatch it. And then I remembered why I didn't remember those things is I watched Game of Thrones in Italian. So when he was saying the call and response stuff, I really hadn't heard it, at least not in English. I'd heard it in Italian, and you know, English is still my native language. My Italian skills are pretty good, but it's never going to be like my English skills. And sometimes those lack. But that was kind of like an odd experience listening to that entire program, or almost all of it, in Italian. I wasn't aware of some of these sayings, at least not as they were expressed in English. Highly recommend that tour, by the way. We also did a day tour where we went to the city of Cork, and we went to Blarney Castle, the home of the Blarney Stone. And I fully engaged and did the kissing of the Blarney Stone. We'll see if it makes me any better at long-term talking, gabbing, whatever it was supposed to do. It just was something I've wanted to do for a long time. No rational reason for it. Just thought that'd be really fucking cool. And it was really fucking cool. The castle is much smaller than you might think it is. The walls are very thick, so the rooms are smaller than they appear from the outside, unlike a TARDIS, right? So it's smaller on the inside. So that was good fun. And then we also had another full day tour that had half the day at the Guinness Brewery, and then half the day at the Jameson's Distillery. Yeah, I think a distillery is different than a brewery. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh my God, that's so awesome. That's exciting. And it was awesome. I did try the different Jameson samples that they gave us. Not a real big person on Irish whiskey or Jameson. It was okay. Better than a lot of other choices, but not really my thing. And then when we went to the Guinness tour, I did not get me a Guinness. So I'm going to make people cry. Yes, I was there in the motherland. I could have had a Guinness that was, hours, days old. And so many people around me told me it was better. I took the teeniest of little sips. Absolutely disgusting. Nauseating. I cannot stand beer. Never have. Probably never will. But that's okay. There's a lot of other things one can eat in this world. And then after our personal tours, we got on this cruise ship, the Swan Hellenic, ship called the Vega, SH Vega, Swan Hellenic Vega. Really cool. Now, this is not your Caribbean cruise on a ship that has 3,000 or 4,000 people. There was about 150 customers and about 100 staff. So the ratio is very different. And as you can imagine, it's more expensive. It was all inclusive except the internet. And that fucking pissed me off because I knew that you could get faster speeds and the included internet, because one of the appeals to this cruise is all included. So it's not, they don't try to screw you out of stuff as you go along at racked up prices, except for apparently the internet. So after I got on the ship, I logged on. It was kind of slow, but you could check emails, you could do text messages, and there were several news websites that you could go to, like CNN, Yahoo, even Fox News, which is not news. It's in the name, but it's not news. You could go to those websites, but when I wanted to go to YouTube, no, hard block. It wasn't just slow, it was a no. And also surprising to me, websites like Schwab straight up blocked. So if I wanted to check a client's account or take a client phone call, I could not get to the information. The website that I use for my data collection, where I put in notes about clients and customers and when I call them and the emails that they sent, also just straight up blocked. Now, I went and talked to the service person and they told me, no, it's not blocked, it's just slow. I'm like, no, it's blocked. Here's a website. Example, here's schwab.com. I can't even load it. It doesn't load. And they spent half an hour telling me it's just slow, it's not blocked. And then I happened to see on their desk this 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, printed on both sides and laminated, so it would last a long time, that listed some examples of sites that are specifically blocked. And I pointed to this, I happened to see this on their desk, and they're like, oh, well, maybe some things are blocked, but it's not much. No, false, absolutely false. I don't know if this person was just misinformed or if they were trying to be deceitful. I'm going to go with the first because, ignorance and incompetence is a thing. And so I'm just going to go with they didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. And so what it turned out to be was that the vast majority of anywhere and any place you could go was blocked because they want to keep the traffic on their servers down. They're using SpaceX Starlink, so it worked virtually everywhere once I paid to get the plan that doesn't block everything. It just so happens to be, and I hope you're sitting down, $37.99 a day. So almost 2 weeks, almost $500 that I paid to be able to have full and quite high speed internet all the time we were on the boat. Sometimes when we pulled into ports, I could turn off the Wi-Fi and just use the cellular service network. I think every town we went to had pretty darn good cell phone service, which is cool because we went to some towns that are like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people in the middle of islands in the middle of the northern Atlantic Ocean. So kudos to all those cities and the networks for having those. Sometimes we were on the tour bus going to see a waterfall or a mountain on an island in the middle of the ocean, and there wasn't service. to be expected, but I'm there to see things. But part of the reason I could take a 2-week vacation is that I had done a lot of work in advance of departing, and now I'm back, and I may be a little bit behind, but not too bad. But if someone really wanted to talk or needed me to adjust something or sell something or buy something or invest new money that they added and they don't want to wait, I could call them. And I could log into Schwab. I could make trades. Wasn't as easy as the big fancy giant monitors on my desk because I actually used my phone. I tried an experiment, and next time I will be taking a nice lightweight laptop. I have one. I just try to do everything on my phone. I can do everything on my phone. It's just not as convenient as having a keyboard and a mouse and a bigger screen where you can open up multiple tabs at the same time and move them around. That's easier. And since I already own the computer, next time I will be taking that. So, as an experiment for me to try just doing it on my phone, it worked. Wasn't always lovely. Of course, the other problem is that once you sign up for the $500 internet, I'm pretty sure you can use it on any device, but only one device at a time. So my wife often was having websites blocked and looking at email and notes and Messenger and different communication apps all seem to work at a reasonable but a little bit slower than you'd like speed. So she was able to do that, and it worked out. But I didn't want anyone to feel like I had ignored them or forgotten them because I didn't have access or I couldn't solve a problem that came up. It went pretty well, but that was kind of an annoying thing. One other thing, little petty things. Right when we get on the boat, they hand you a glass of champagne. I'm carrying a backpack and a suitcase. I don't want a glass of champagne. First of all, I don't like champagne. There's a lot of liquors I don't like, but whatever. I don't like champagne, and I'm holding this glass, and I can't just drop it, set it down. I ended up sitting it down on the check-in counter, and I'm saying, you guys do with this whatever you want. I'm not drinking it. So that was weird to me, awkward, inconvenient. I mean, once I checked in, maybe hand me a glass of champagne as I'm on my way to my room. So there was that. We also had one stop. Oh, by the way, after we took off, we went to multiple islands and remote cities in Scotland and north end of Scotland. We went to the Orkney Islands up above Scotland, and then we went to the Faroe Islands, which are even further north. Not part of Scotland, by the way. They're technically part of Denmark. And then from there, we went over to an island north of Iceland. It's part of Iceland, but it's north of the main island. And then stopped in several small cities throughout Iceland. Absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely fantastic. Beautiful place to visit. I don't know why people would want to live there. Maybe around Reykjavik, the main city, because it's big enough and has modern accoutrements. But these towns with 500 people, 1,000 people, man, you're going to have to really like the weather. The other thing that was interesting is that, of course, we were there in early, middle June. The sun goes down, but not much that time of year. Matter of fact, the island that we were on the north side of Iceland, oh my God, the name escapes me right now. It was actually the northern tip of this island is in the Arctic Circle. So I was able to actually go and I can say now that I have been in the Arctic Circle, north of the Arctic Circle. That was very cool. That island, I don't think anyone, no, there was like 400 people. No, I'm sorry. 86 or something like that. 80 something people lived on that island. Absolutely fascinating. It is probably 2 or 3 hours to get there by ferry from the main island. So if you wanted to buy stuff, you had to plan. You had to go when the ferry went, and I think it was 5 times a week. So it's not even every day. It's a 3-hour ferry ride to a bigger town where you can do your shopping, and then a 3-hour ferry ride back. So, and I don't know what the time difference is between when you arrive and when you can come back. It might force you to stay overnight. I don't know. I didn't look into it that much, but you're talking about at least a full day to go get supplies and buy groceries. So you better have a plan. You better know what you're going to get and get it while you're there. But if you want to be where there's very few people and a whole lot of land you can go walk around, very cool. The main Iceland, the islands, the mountains on the island were amazing, snow-capped. There's a giant glacier on Iceland. We actually had a day trip where we went to a little lake, pond, not bigger than a pond, but a very small lake that a glacier is melting and calving into from time to time. And so while I didn't get to, per se, walk on a glacier, I was able to hold actual, very, very old glacial ice. It was so old that it had been compressed to the point that there was no air in it, and it's just floating around in this small lake. And a couple people went into the water and brought out pieces. So I have actually touched glacier ice. Yay, that was kind of cool. But like I said, absolutely beautiful. And then the last day we got to Reykjavik, and we got off the boat and went to the airport. So the one big, with air quotes, big town in all of Iceland, it was passed through. So I really wish we had a couple of days to check out that town, that city, and its surrounding environment, but we didn't. The only other thing to keep in mind, of course, on something like this was more of an adventure cruise, is what they like to bill it as. Because we were in the North Arctic Ocean, there were a couple days, particularly at the beginning, where seas were pretty rough. At least pretty rough compared to what most of the people on that ship had ever been through. And that probably includes me, but I don't get seasickness, really. There was one point where I kind of felt a little off, but it wasn't that bad. I could still eat, I could still drink, I could walk with some great difficulty. But there were people who literally vomited all day for 3 days. I only found that out later in the cruise, because they weren't out and about telling us that they were vomiting. But I ran into some people that they were like, yeah, the first 3 days were just fucking hell. And I was like, God, that fucking suck. So make sure before you go on one of these cruises that that you can handle or get some medicine or do whatever you've got to do. One of the people that got sick on a regular basis had a premium room, which is on a higher level of the boat. In case you didn't know this, because most people, why would you? To reduce possible motion sickness in a boat, you want to be as low, as close to the water, and in the center of the boat as possible. So the lowest floor you have access to, not on the left or right side, the port or starboard side, not in the front or back. What is the front? I know the back is aft, but you want to be in the middle, because if that boat is, the nose and tail are going back and forth, up and down like a seesaw, as you can imagine, in the center of the seesaw or the center of that boat, you can feel the motion forward and back, but you're not moving very far. But if you're near the either end of the boat, aft, that's still the back. Damn it. But if you're near the front or back of the boat, the amount of swing, while it's only a few degrees, the biggest degree I measured was 9 degrees off of horizontal. But if it does that in 5 or 10 seconds, you can go up 10 or 20 feet and then down 10 or 20 feet in the front of the boat within a very short period of time. That'll mess you up. So if you do get seasickness, little tip for me, get as low on the boat as possible and as near to the center of the boat. So the pitch and the roll and the yaw don't affect you as much. It can be very disorienting. Disorienting. Yeah. So anyway, that's some thoughts about the cruise. The food, by the way, absolutely amazing. Here's the funny thing. I ate a lot of food. And I'm still using my little device that gives me blood glucose, blood sugar readings every minute. And it really helped me out, because I had one breakfast where I thought I did a really good job of eating healthy foods, and my blood sugar went over to 250, 260, 20, 30 minutes later. And so the next day I had the exact same breakfast, but not the orange juice. So now I've learned, for me, and probably for many people, not only does orange juice have a generous amount of sugar, and of course it can depend on the orange juice that you get. This one apparently had very little to no fiber in it. It's a very fast processing sugar, and so it hits your blood and it hits it fast. So that's bad magic. I think I could probably get away with maybe 2 or 3 ounces. I think I only had 5 or 6 ounces, but half of that would be better. I just didn't have any more orange juice. I'm not a huge orange juice drinker fan, but I do like orange juice. So in the future, if I go to a store and I buy orange juice, I want to get orange juice with less sugar and or more fiber. I could have eaten an orange and had no problem because you're only getting so much juice. Outside of that, you're getting fiber, but just a 6-ounce glass of orange juice. And I've come to realize that I can eat candy. I just can't eat candy. You know what I'm saying? So I can't do, I don't know what it was, Smarties, gummy bears, something. I can't sit and eat a pound of gummy bears. No one should, right? That I don't need the meter to know that, but I wasn't able to see how dramatic the effects were until I've got this device on my arm, the continuous glucose monitor, which I highly recommend to anybody that has any kind of problems with diabetes, type 1, type 2, pre-diabetes, or you just want to check your blood sugar, and if your insurance doesn't pay for it, you can just buy it yourself. I talked about that. So anyway, wrapping up the opening comments here, talking about the cruise. Great fun. Glad to be back. Going to take a quick break, and then we have fun segments. Just want to jump in here and tell you that some of the sound clips you're going to hear in this show and for the next couple of episodes are lectures by Robert Green Ingersoll, and these clips are used and available for download at their website. It's titled the 2-CD Set Download Lectures by Ingersoll. Several years ago, they paid a professional voice actor to read these selected pieces of Robert Green Ingersoll's speeches from over 100 years ago. And I have not played these for several years, so hopefully you enjoy them as much as I do. I'll try to fit 2 or 3 pieces in each episode of this podcast for the next several weeks, maybe up to 2 months to get them all there. But I just wanted to head off everybody from asking me what this is. These are lectures by Robert Green Ingersoll from over 100 years ago, before 1899, because that's when he passed away. And they have been recorded by a professional voice actor. And you can buy it on the centerforinquiry.org website in their store. You just look for the 2-CD set download lectures by Ingersoll, and they'll ship it to you, and you get 2 full hours of professional recording of Robert Green Ingersoll for just $12. So kudos for the Center for Inquiry for doing this so many years ago and still having it available if you want to get the audio files. So enjoy.
Somebody ought to tell the truth about the Bible. The preachers dare not because they would be driven from their pulpits. Professors in college dare not because they would lose their salaries. Politicians dare not. They would be defeated. Editors dare not. They would lose subscribers. Merchants dare not because they might lose customers. Men of fashion dare not, fearing they would lose caste. Even clerks dare not because they might be discharged. And so I thought I would do it myself. There are many millions of people who believe the Bible to be the inspired Word of God. Millions who think that this book is staff and guide, counselor and consoler, that it fills the present with peace and the future with hope. Millions who believe that it is the fountain of law, justice and mercy, that to its wise and benign teachings the world is indebted for its liberty, wealth and civilization. Millions who imagine that this book is a revelation from the wisdom and love of God to the brain and heart of man. Millions who regard this book as a torch that conquers the darkness of death and pours its radiance on another world, a world without a tear. They forget its ignorance and savagery, its hatred of liberty, its religious persecution. They remember heaven, but they forget the dungeon of eternal pain. They forget that it imprisons the brain and corrupts the heart. They forget that it is the enemy of intellectual freedom. Liberty is my religion. Liberty of hand and brain, of thought and labor. Liberty is a word hated by kings, loathed by popes. It is a word that shatters thrones and altars, that leaves the crowned without subjects and the outstretched hand of superstition without arms. Liberty is the blossom and fruit of justice, the perfume of mercy. Liberty is the seed and soil, the air and light, the dew and rain of progress, love, and joy.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This Investing Skeptically segment is about bond index funds versus you buying individual bonds one at a time through a broker. And it is another one of these segments that's inspired by a regular listener, and they'll know who they are because of this topic. But thank you for the idea, the question, the suggestion. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So I really like bond index funds versus buying individual bonds. And the question was, Phil, you've said this before, but it's kind of just a comment, but not an actual segment. So here's the segment. Just like buying individual stocks, I prefer index funds. A lot of that same logic, almost all that same logic applies. And it might even be more meaningful logic because the cost of buying individual bonds is often more than buying individual stocks. Not always, but sometimes it is. And of course, it can be more to buy and more to sell. And individual bonds are wickedly complicated. One of the things that I find fascinating is people tend to think that bonds are simpler than stocks. They are not. They are much, much, much more complicated. There's all kinds of different risks involved. There's all kinds of different problems involved. There's all kinds of different costs involved. So if you buy individual bonds, you have to pay to buy each bond. You have to pay to sell each bond. Now, the transaction costs might be small, but they're not as small as a bond index fund. You also have a limitation how many bonds you can buy, unless you have a really large portfolio. So the expenses are going to be higher in relationship to the bonds that you own. Also, bonds generally, depending on the risk level you're looking at, in the long run can make 2, 3, 4%. So going from 0.2% expense ratio to an actual 1 or 2% expense ratio that you may or may not see, the damage is more dramatic in bond funds than it is in stock funds. It can take up something like half of your annual returns if you're actively trading in bond funds. As an addition, the author of the email said that their mom looks at index funds and sees them go up and down in value where the individual bonds don't. Well, that is a mistake. Not a mistake, factually incorrect. The individual bonds that you own do go up and down in value. And in this case, the author's mother apparently is not looking at them in that way. And that's perfectly fine. But if you own 10 bonds that are publicly traded, and please do not ever buy any bonds that are not publicly traded. But if you buy bonds that are publicly traded, you can go check the price. Probably daily, maybe even in real time, depending on how actively they are traded. And you could say, I have 1,000 shares of this bond, and it was $12, and now it's $11.50. So the value of your bonds, individual bonds, goes up and down just as much as an index fund of bonds goes up and down. So that's not actually an issue. It's just the way this person happens to be able to easily pull up a bond fund and see how much it's gone up and down, but not easily pull up all the price points on the bonds, individual bonds that they own. But they do go up and down. So if you want to sell them, they go up and down. One possible exception is that if for some very specific reason you want to own a bond to maturity, so you buy $10,000 worth of a 10-year bond and you are going to hold it for 10 years, the price will still go up and down daily, continuously, but it won't matter to you if you literally hold it for the entire 10 years. It doesn't matter what the price is in the interim. However, I generally use bonds to fulfill some interesting requirements and philosophies in my portfolio design. and they go into the cushion, and they're meant to be there in case stock prices go down. So if it's going to be something that you're going to buy and hold for the long run, okay, maybe it'd be a better way to do it. But for most people, if the bonds are there to be available when the stock market goes down, the individual bonds may go up or may go down. And so when you need to pull money out, you still have that same volatility problem when the bonds are used as part of your cushion. So they all go up and down. That's just how bonds work. The biggest thing is cutting the expenses, cutting the transaction costs, making it really easy, of helping you avoid all the research and work that is necessary, in my opinion, in buying good bonds. Now, if you have a broker or an advisor who is coming to you and just recommending you buy this bond or that bond, you better be confident that they know what the fuck they're doing, and they're doing it for your benefit, not their benefit. An additional problem, and this occurs with stocks as well as bonds, the brokerage firm or the broker that's calling you may work for a firm that is underwriting that bond. If they are acting as the dealer and they're selling bonds to you that they control and own, I don't think there's a limit to how much money they can make. So the bond may sell at a face value of $20 per bond, but they get them for $16 a bond. And so they can make $4 out of 16. That's what, 25%. So their motivation could be very much to have you buy it because they make money. A broker is not a fiduciary. They don't have to be a fiduciary. They only have to prove, wink, wink, prove, if ever pushed to, that the investment that they selected for you was suitable. And the suitability standard is very low, very, very easy to meet, very easy to document, and very hard for you to claim that they fucked you because it wasn't suitable. Good luck with that. It's probably not going to be worth your time and effort. It's just not going to work. So a brokerage firm like Morgan Stanley could underwrite a bond for a large company, let's just say AT&T, no specific reason, I'm just giving you a name, and that brokerage firm might make 5, 10, 25% on selling those because they buy them all so the company has the money right away. And they buy them at a discount, and then they sell them to you. And that bond may never be worth the amount that you think it is, at least not in the short run. In the long run, it probably is, but somebody has to pay those commissions and those fees. And as, of course, as a regular listener, you know that is you. So that's some of the logic and rationale for me to not do individual bonds. Costs is a big driver. You don't know what you're doing. Risk is a big driver. Convenience and flexibility of an index fund is a driver. I really didn't get into it just last minute here. You can buy bonds that can default. So the bonds that are being sold to you or recommended to you by your broker may not do well. They may get to a point that they're never worth what the face value is. Often that happens with higher yielding bonds, or sometimes AKA junk bonds. These are bonds that can pay 6, 7, 8% or even more. And you think, wow, what a great yield, what a great dividend. This is fantastic. Well, part of the reason the yield is that high is because the underwriter, the dealer, the brokerage firm, the company that's issuing the bonds, the reason they're paying those higher rates is because they feel like they have to, because they understand the risks involved. You must also understand the risks that are involved, or you run the risk of being burned. So let's see, higher costs, no improvement in volatility. You have to do your research. You can get shitty bonds that pay a big commission to a salesperson, and you could be buying high risk bonds and not knowing that they're high risk bonds because you were just chasing the high yield because someone recommended it, and of course that person that's recommending it is getting the commission. I think that's enough, right? That should be enough rationale why you should not use individual bonds.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Section 1. The Origin of the Bible. A few wandering families, poor, wretched, without education, art, or power, descendants of those who had been enslaved for 400 years, ignorant as the inhabitants of Central Africa, had just escaped from their masters to the desert of Sinai. Their leader was Moses, a man who had been raised in the family of Pharaoh and had been taught the law and mythology of Egypt. For the purpose of controlling his followers, he pretended that he was instructed and assisted by Jehovah, the God of these wanderers. Everything that happened was attributed to the interference of this God. Moses declared that he met this God face to face, that on Sinai's top from the hands of this God he had received the tables of stone on which, by the finger of this God, the 10 Commandments had been written, and that in addition to this, Jehovah had made known the sacrifices and ceremonies that were pleasing to him, and the laws by which the people should be governed. At that time these wanderers had no commerce with other nations. They had no written language. They could neither read nor write. They had no means by which they could make this revelation known to other nations. And so it remained buried in the jargon of a few ignorant, impoverished, and unknown tribes for more than 2,000 years. Many centuries after Moses the leader was dead, many centuries after all his followers had passed away, the Pentateuch was written, the work of many writers, and to give it force and authority, it was claimed that Moses was the author. We now know that the Pentateuch was not written by Moses. Towns are mentioned that were not in existence when Moses lived. Money, not coined until centuries after his death, is mentioned. So many of the laws were not applicable to wanderers on the desert. Laws about agriculture, about the sacrifice of oxen, sheep, and doves, about the weaving of cloth, about ornaments of gold and silver, about the cultivation of land, about harvest, about the threshing of grain, about houses and temples, about cities of refuge, and about many other subjects of no possible application to a few starving wanderers over the sands and rocks.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. I've got 2 topics here that somehow have become one, so this is kind of cool. It happens a lot. I guess maybe if I'm exposed to enough or talk to enough people, things come up and suddenly go ping, ping, ping and hit 3 or 4 times from several different angles. So the first thing, and I'll probably bitch about this more in another segment, there's a new rule for investment advisors that requires them to get 12 CE credits. CE is continuing education. Up till now, it's been kind of an optional thing, and I'm always trying to learn more, so, maybe everybody should. That'd be cool. I have no problem with that, but it's a very defined program. I have to get 12 credits, 6 credits from products, and 6 credits from ethical classes. Now, each credit usually is a 1-hour class, and they are online. They're available from many different places, and I have to study the material, and I have to take their test or their quiz or whatever and get a 70% or higher to pass that content. Well, as it turns out, both California and Florida have recently adopted this rule effective for calendar year 2024. So I don't have 12 months to get 12 credits. I have about 6-7 months to get 12 credits. And so, of course, you have to find the programs, you have to register. In many cases, you have to pay for the programs. You have to do the studying, and then you have to pass the test. And they will kindly report that information to the appropriate government body so that I meet the criteria that are required. And I'm not particularly opposed to it, but it's another thing stacked on top of all of the regulatory stuff that I already have to do. So it's 12 classes. Theoretically, they're 1 hour, but you've got to find, register, pay, study, take the quiz. So, maybe 18 or 20 hours of work over the year. But, that's an extra half week of work that I wasn't planning on. So anyway, the first class I took was on reits. And I've talked about reits, and I thought, hey, I know this subject matter pretty good, but it can't hurt to bone up on it. And so I took that. And the really important distinction to know, there's 3 different classes, categories, types of REITs. There are ones that are publicly traded on a stock exchange. You can look them up. You can see what their value is. They're evaluated every day. You can buy and sell almost at whim all the time, as long as the market is open. And historically, I've used something in that category, usually through the Vanguard REIT Index Fund, and it would invest almost exclusively in publicly traded REITs. In the past, I've had recommendations to have as much as 10% of your portfolio in REITs and real estate, things like this. And currently, thankfully, I'm around 5%. If you're a few percent below or a few percent above, fine, you're in the ballpark, but you want to keep it relatively limited. And REITs have done meh to poorly in the last few years, as would be expected when interest rates go up. The other thing that has hit other categories of REITs even more dramatically is if they're more into commercial or industrial space. Office space, work from home, did not affect REITs as quickly as I thought they would, because I didn't take into account that a lot of those types of contracts, rental agreements, are often 5, 7, 10, 12-year agreements. So even if you want to get out of it as the rentee, the person renting the building, you're in a contract. So you've got to wait. And then when the contract comes up, people renegotiate and either take less space or are willing to pay dramatically less. And that pushes the value of all that real estate down, which is part of the reason why my REIT recommendation has gone from no more than 10 to give or take 5%. It's only a few percentage point shift, but tended to work out pretty well. The Vanguard REIT fund, which I'm looking at here, Vanguard Real Estate Index Fund Admiral shares. So you have to have some extra money to put it in there. Not sure what the minimum is on this on the top of my head, but it could be quite big, but I don't remember. But it's just a fund I happen to look at. You can look at it on your own. Minimum investment, $3,000. The symbol is VGSLX, and I'm on the Vanguard website, and I just pulled it up today. The 1-year performance is minus 0.43. Year to date is minus 9.09. And the 10-year is 5% per year. Longer run, it's 9-10% is kind of what it averages. And the nice thing about a REIT fund is it tends to not go up or down when other investments go up or down. And this is clearly the case in this calendar year, because year to date, the S&P 500, give or take, is up 10, 12, 14%. And year to date, the REIT is down 9%. So that is definitely a very different result. One category of investments up 10 plus, the other one's down 9. So that reduces your overall volatility. Now, of course, it sucks because the most magnificent way to reduce volatility is have things that go up and have things that go down. I don't want to reduce volatility that much. And it's been an unfortunate performer. And I'm delighted that we're trying to trend towards 5% instead of just under 10%. But REITs have struggled. So that's publicly traded REITs that you can look up on the stock market. The next category is the non-traded REITs, which almost is what anyone who listens to the show might be involved in or could have been involved in or got sold something. So you can invest money, but you may struggle to get it out because it's not publicly traded. It's not available for you to go on the stock exchange and sell your shares or whatever. And you have to go back to the company that you gave your money to and hit them up. And I've talked about some of these REITs have done historically really, really fucking bad. And as an example, and I do not mean to pick on this customer, I'm not going to tell you any details about them. I actually have several customers that have things like this. Keep in mind, I did not sell them this. I did not recommend this. And sometimes they get stuck. A lot of these non-traded REIT companies, and they talk about, and they have all these fancy websites to tell you how you can invest in real estate. Yeah, okay, but you don't control the cost structure. You don't control how much they pay another company that they happen to own to manage the property. You don't control who they hire to build, if they're building apartment buildings or something. And they could hire a company that is also owned by the management team and maybe not get the best price. And so you lose. Here is one example. And again, I've had other people in the past that have had REITs when they've come to me. The non-traded, I generally call them private placement, which is maybe not the best choice because the third category of REITs are private REITs. So you have publicly traded, non-traded, and then you have private. So I call the non-traded private placement because they put you in it. I guess it's not technically private. It's just not traded. So I'll try to use the better language going forward. I have an example here. Someone that bought in around the calendar year 2013, I think the initial purchase was $75,000 in this REIT. And one of the unfortunate things is they had it set up to auto reinvest the dividends. So as the REIT was paying out dividends, the dividends went back into buying more shares. One of the problems with these non-traded REITs is they have different rules for figuring out how much each share of the REIT is worth. So when this person initially bought the $75,000 worth, the REIT was worth $10 a share. It was just a set price, and that's what it was. But over the last 10 years, 11 years now, it has gone from a total value of $75,000. It is now worth $27,000. So it has lost 2/3 of its value over the last decade. I don't know off the top of my head how much the stock market has gone up in the last decade, but it didn't go down. I don't know. I would guess conservatively, the stock market over the last decade has easily doubled. And so the $75,000 investment could be $150,000, could be more. It doesn't really matter. So when this investment goes from $75,000 to $27,000, where you've lost almost 2/3, not only did you lose almost 2/3 of your money, you didn't make money. So your $75,000, instead of becoming worth $150,000 or more, became worth $27,000. And they still don't have their money out of this investment yet. They still can't really get their money out of the investment. And then it just came up in the news today, another different real estate fund, which is different than what this client of mine owns, is called Starwood Real Estate. Apparently, they're a big player in the business. I don't know who the fuck they are. I never heard of them because I'm not interested in this shit because I know it's problematic. Well, they apparently have a policy where no more than 2% of the assets can leave in any given quarter, calendar quarter. And probably like other REITs that I've dealt with, the non-traded REITs, you have to get a form and you have to fill it out. You have to do everything correctly. You have to get it to them in time. And it's a complex process because they don't really want to give you the money back because either A, they're making money on it, or B, and a very reasonable thing to be concerned about, they've bought buildings, they've built apartment complexes, they've built neighborhoods or medical facilities. The money's all put into real estate. They don't have the cash laying around and they're not traded, hence the non-traded category. So where does the money come from? It has to come out of their cash flow. And so they may have to give smaller dividends, or they may have to tell people they don't have enough cash. And so this particular organization here, what was the name again? My God, did the name? No, Starwood, there it is. They have a rule where I think it's no more than 2% per month and no more than 5% per quarter. And it might even be limited on an annual basis. And I don't know that. But for the last 2 months, they've had requests back for at least 2%. And apparently they've met them. But now they have a problem. They don't really have any more cash left, or they're about to run out of cash. And so they had to send a letter out to everybody saying, hey, we're going to put a hold on this because we don't have any cash. We can't pay you out. And you think to yourself, well, you own all these buildings and properties, sell them. Well, now they could, but some commercial properties around the United States, because of COVID, because of high interest rates now to kind of slow down the economy, there are some buildings and some properties that have lost 20, 30, 40% of their market value. It is not a good time to sell stuff, and they're optimistic that they'll be able to sell for a higher price in the future. A traded REIT or even a non-traded REIT generally has a 10-year lifespan. Like I said, this one client that I was talking about that has lost 2/3, they bought it 11 years ago. And the company is having trouble selling the properties now. They're working on it, so they claim, and they're hoping in a couple of years they'll have it. And as they sell individual properties, they might send cash to everybody so you get part of your money back. But I'm optimistic, or I guess I'm pessimistic is the right way to say it. I'm pessimistic that they're even going to get the $27,000, which is the current valuation that all of their shares are worth. Again, it's not publicly traded. And so the company you gave your money to creates the price, and they have to pay you out based on that. So when it comes time to paying out, they might change the value, which was 10, which now is like 35 or $3.50, $3.70. They might lower it to 3 or to 2 or to $1. I don't know. I'm going to keep an eye on this, and it's a horrific return for an individual person. And thankfully, it was only a small part of their portfolio. And they have something like $1 million, but it didn't need to happen. And people shouldn't be selling these things. And so the class that I took, it talked about the 3 categories. Again, publicly traded, non-publicly traded, and then private, where there's other restrictions on you getting in it. You have to be a qualified investor, and there's obviously more risk, but there's different pros and cons. But I think all of these things, at least the second two categories, the second and the third category, I'm not interested in. I recommend against it. And if you do publicly traded REITs, you do it through an index fund, not through individual purchases, and you keep it to around right now 5%. If I think real estate at some point, at least the kind that's in REITs, is going to go up, maybe we would increase that, but I'm still not in love with it. So give or take 5%. If you had 10% and it's now 5%, just hang in there. It's not everything has to work out all the time. And this is one that in the past, we've had some really good years where the returns pop, but it's not been lately. That's for sure. So that's some thoughts on REITs, the different types of REITs, the different categories of REITs, and how some companies are now, even though theoretically are on the hook to pay out, flex a clause in the contract that you may have signed that says, at their discretion, they can stop paying out money. And even if the REIT is designed to be liquidated in 10 years, it may not. It probably won't, especially if 10 years is now. And it can take a long time to get your money out, and you're not going to get what you think you're going to get. And sadly, you're not getting the growth that you could have gotten if you just used a standard stock index fund or even a publicly traded REIT index fund. So more than you ever wanted to know about REITs.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
It is now not only admitted by intelligent and honest theologians that Moses was not the author of the Pentateuch, but they all admit that no one knows who the authors were, or who wrote any of these books, or a chapter, or a line. We know that the books were not written in the same generation, that they were not all written by one person, that they are filled with mistakes and contradictions. It is also admitted that Joshua did not write the book that bears his name, because it refers to events that did not happen until long after his death. No one knows or pretends to know the author of Judges. All we know is that it was written centuries after all the judges had ceased to exist. No one knows the author of Ruth, nor of 1st and 2nd Samuel, All we know is that Samuel did not write the books that bear his name. In the 25th chapter of 1 Samuel is an account of the raising of Samuel by the witch of Endor. No one knows the author of 1st and 2nd Kings, or 1st and 2nd Chronicles. All we know is that these books are of no value. We know that the Psalms were not written by David. In the Psalms, the captivity is spoken of, and that did not happen until about 500 years after David slept with his fathers. We know that Solomon did not write the Proverbs or the Song, that Isaiah was not the author of the book that bears his name, that no one knows the author of Job, Ecclesiastes, or Esther, or of any book in the Old Testament with the exception of Ezra. We know that God is not mentioned or in any way referred to in the book of Esther. We know, too, that the book is cruel, absurd, and impossible. God is not mentioned in the Song of Solomon, the best book in the Old Testament, and we know that Ecclesiastes was written by an unbeliever. We know, too, that the Jews themselves had not decided as to what books were inspired or authentic until the 2nd century after Christ. We know that the idea of inspiration was of slow growth, and that the inspiration was determined by those who had certain ends to accomplish.
It's about that time to wrap up the show. Of course, I am delighted that you're here. If you feel up to it, go leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or any other sites that you can find. I would greatly appreciate it. Of course, you can refer friends and family to come listen to the show. And you can send me an email if you have questions about your investments, or if you have a show topic idea. I can always use those. Phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. Did an interesting thing. I talked about the cruise and going into the Arctic Circle. Just for laughs, I did a little searching, not much, on Antarctic cruises. And of course, now on multiple social media platforms, that's all the ads that I get. So, yay, they're listening. They're always listening, at least to what we click on and search for. So, going to go back to work, unfortunately, because I'm a little bit behind, having been away on this voyage. If you had left me a voicemail or an email and I didn't respond to, my sincerest apologies. Feel free to bug me again. I'm actually still going through the spam that hit over the last 2 weeks, and I'm thinking I should clear that out today. So I did find one legitimate email in there, and I've responded to that person. But if you've sent something and I didn't respond, please feel free to send a reminder email or a follow-up. That's not a problem. Anywho, that's the show for today. And like I said, I got to go back to work and call some people and balance some portfolios, all that good fun stuff. And I appreciate you listening to the show. And I will be at BajaCon in, oh my God, I'm going to have to check, later this summer. How's that? The FFRF convention later this year, and CSI Con in Las Vegas. And next time I'll actually have the dates, so I can not just say later this year. But you can Google it, of course. Go to a convention. If you happen to go to one and you see me, please feel free to come up and say hello. Until then, ciao.